Good news, it's not COVID. Bad news, I still feel like crap, so let's get this over with. I'm wearing a different shirt because I am re-recording this intro. Someone asked me if I was going to do an update to my must-haves from the Lobi Store video, and I was initially hesitant to do that because the Lobi Store hasn't really updated all that much. But I put up a poll, most of you voted yes, so here I am working on the updated version for the must-haves in the Lobi Store video, and it is taking longer than I thought it would. Part of that's due to just how sick I am. I don't know if you can tell, but I feel like death right now. I am miserable. But also just due to the size of the Lobi Store. So instead of doing one long video, I'm going to split this up into 2 or maybe 3 shorter videos. In this video, I'm just going to be going over the ships and crew tab of the Lobi Store. The second video might be both space and ground gear, or it might be space gear and then ground gear will be the third video, depending on how long those take, so we'll see. So yeah, I wanted to do this just because, just because the Lobi Store hasn't changed all that much doesn't mean that my opinions haven't changed about certain things in the Lobi Store, so it could be worth doing a whole other video on, or in this case a whole series on, apparently. And yeah, I hope you guys don't mind this becoming a small series, but I kind of need to do this for my own sake. Anyway, let's get on to reviewing the ships available in the Lobi Store. The Undine Kawaii Biocruiser is arguably one of the best support tanks in the game. Having 4 Lieutenant Commander level bridge officer seats affords this ship to have more high level bridge officer abilities than most ships. Plus it's a command cruiser, that's one of the big reasons why it works so well as a support ship. But I would only invest in this ship if I was wanting to do support for high level DPS runs. Meaning you'd be doing a mix of tanking and debuffing for the sake of increasing the DPS of one single player. Oh, I should also mention that the Kawaii is also available in the Lost in the DQ Muds Market bundle, so if you really like the ship and you have the money for a Muds Market bundle, you do have the option of getting this unlocked on your whole account. The Voth Bastille is a pretty decent science ship, being a temporal science vessel. It also has a command seat, but it's only at the lieutenant level, so you're not going to get much use out of that. But being a science ship, this is going to be well suited for EPG builds, and temporal pairs really well with EPG builds. And that's because temporal is good for making additional anomalies and for creating additional unconventional systems triggers. Science builds are very dependent on the universal consoles, so you want to lower those cooldowns as much as you can. Not a bad ship if you're looking for a science vessel, but there are plenty of other temporal science vessels that I would pick over this. The Vern is the first to come to mind, but that is a lockbox ship, so it's going to be harder to obtain. But there's also the Eternal and the Grissom available in the Sea Store, and I would pick any of those 3 over this. The one thing the Bastille has over those 3 ships is a Voth Battle Cloak, so if you're wanting something more stealthy, this might be the better option for you. The Tholian Iktomi. Based on its stats alone, this is a truly unremarkable ship. Being a science vessel with a Lieutenant Commander Miracle Worker seat and a Lieutenant level command seat, yeah, neither of those are going to benefit a science build all that well. Plus it's not even full spec, so it's not even going to have the Miracle Worker mechanic. Not that that would help a science build significantly either. While the ship itself is pretty lame, the starship trait it comes with is pretty remarkable. Improved Photonic Officer. This thing has been part of the science build meta for quite some time now, ever since the ship was first introduced. For a while, this starship trait was the only means for lowering the bridge officer cooldowns on any of your science vessels, because an Aux to Bat build was out of the question for a science build because you need that auxiliary power where it is. The Boimler effect has really helped out for that, making this a little bit less vital for bridge officer cooldowns, but at the same time, Improved Photonic Officer does give a nice bonus damage buff to your exotic damage. Enough so that this still remains a part of the EPG meta. Though, frankly, even if you're not running a science build, this could still be a nice alternative to an Aux to Bat build, for the sake of lowering your bridge officer cooldowns. Really just depends on where you want to prioritize, but yeah, this trait is good for more than just science builds. The Herc Assembly Multi-Mission Science Vessel. Stats-wise, this ship is a little bit more interesting than the Iktomi. Being a multi-mission science vessel with a 4-2 weapons layout, this means not only are you going to have more forward weapon slots than you would on most science vessels, but also that it's going to have a hangar bay. It also has a Lieutenant Commander command seat, so you can easily make a really science-heavy torpedo build on this. Though this is another one where I think the main appeal here is the starship trait, Hive Bearer. With this trait, anytime you launch a hangar pet, you'll also spawn in an allied Herc Swarmer. It'll function like any other pet, it'll fight alongside you, it'll only stick around for 60 seconds however, and you can only have a maximum of 8 at a time. Still, that's 8 more pets than you'd have normally. So use this starship trait on something with 2 hangar bays, like a carrier or a flight deck carrier, and you're going to be having a good supply of those Herc Swarmers. And then mix in the console from the Hydra, and that thing's going to hit even harder because you have 8 additional pets. So if you like carrier builds, this might be worth picking up. The Maquis Raider. This is an escort with a 5-1 weapons layout plus an experimental weapon. It's a raider, so you'll do raider flanking, meaning you'll do additional damage when hitting an enemy on its rear arc. This one actually has improved raider flanking, so you'll do even more damage. And this thing is also a full miracle worker ship, so it's going to be really well suited to energy weapon builds. So if you like beam overload or cannons, this is a good one to pick up. Of course, that said, I would probably still pick up the Adamant or the Eagle over this thing. The Adamant is an intel ship with a temporal seat and a battle cloak, so arguably it could be better for energy weapon builds because that's going to have surgical strikes. And then there's the Eagle, which is actually better suited for torpedo builds. So that means you've got the option of two different Sea Store ships that are actually better suited to two different builds than this thing is. However, the Maquis Raider does come with something else of interest, and that's its console, Plasma Storm Module. This is a very powerful exotic damage console, and is very valuable on an EPG build. So this is another one of, if you like science ships, you're probably going to want this ship, not for the ship itself, but because of what it comes with. The Maquis Raider is also available in a Muds Market bundle, the Out of This Wormhole choice pack. So if you have the money for a Muds Market bundle and you like this ship or its console enough that you want it to be reclaimable on your whole account, you have that option. The Temporal Destroyers are interesting. Not bad for an energy weapon based build, but having a 4-3 weapons layout does kind of make them to me. Personally, I would pick up one of the Temporal Warships from the Sea Store over one of these. The Walker class is pretty unremarkable. It gets points for having a 5-3 weapons layout, but its seating and its console and trait are pretty lackluster. If you really like the look of the Walker class, don't let that stop you, but at the same time, I would just save up for the Legendary version because it's a much better ship. It's a similar story with the Zenkethi Battlecruiser. Points for being a 5-3 layout, but there are plenty of better battlecruisers. I'd pick the Gagarin Miracle Worker Battlecruiser out of the Sea Store over either of these. Or the Hysperion Intel Battlecruiser that I'm sitting in now. This thing's fantastic. The Sona Intel Battlecruiser. This one I really like. I always felt like the Sona Battlecruiser was a little underappreciated. It's a 5-3 Intel Battlecruiser, so it's a good candidate for surgical strikes. Of course, you could go with any of the vanilla firing modes as well. You know, beam overload, cannon scatter volley, whatever you like. It's a bit heavy on engineering seating, but fortunately the commander level engineering seat is also the intel seat, so there's a lot of crossover there. It also has a command seat, but it's only lieutenant level, so you're not going to be able to put a torpedo build on this thing, which is a real shame because of the starship trait this thing comes with. Subspatial warheads. Every time you use torpedo high yield, you will spawn a subspatial tear. This tear will deal physical damage to any enemies nearby, and can slowly follow them. On a proper torpedo build, you can use high yield quite a bit, so you'll be able to spawn a good number of these tears, resulting in a lot of damage from them. Which is why this starship trait has been part of the torpedo meta for years now, and is kind of the big selling point for this ship. This one's also available in a Muds bundle, the Muds Secret Intel Choice Pack. That pack also has the Nokjedge Intel Battlecruiser, which comes with another meta torpedo build trait. So if you really like torpedo builds and have the money for it, that might be the better route for you. The Zini Reptilian Escort is hardly worth talking about. The Husnak warship is pretty nice. A full temporal warship with a 5-3 weapons layout, really nice for beam overload. It also has a decent starship trait if you like surgical strikes or reroute reserves. But again, I would probably just pick up one of the temporal warships from the Sea Store because that way it's at least an account unlock. The Tel Shiar Adapted Battlecruiser. This one's kind of weird, but not necessarily in a bad way. And that's because of its bridge officer seating, because this is one of the few ships in the game that has a commander level universal seat. The trade-off for that, however, is that the ship is not full spec, so it only has a Lieutenant Commander command seat and a Lieutenant level intel seat. But I'd hardly call either of those things a bad thing, because that command seat is enough to give you a torpedo build, because you'll have Concentrate Firepower 3, and the intel seat is going to give you some extra unconventional systems triggers. It does have a 4-4 weapons layout, so take that however you want. 4-4 used to be the preferred layout for torpedo builds because you could get extra mines in there, but then the Maelstrom torpedo came out, so 5-3 was back on top, but now the Maelstrom torpedo's been nerfed, and I don't know if that's still the case or not. Another weird thing about this ship is that you would think it would be a warbird, but it's actually not. So this means it actually takes a normal warp core instead of a singularity core. Another thing about this ship to talk about is its starship trait, Assimilated Power Conduits. This is another trait that's really nice for science builds, particularly EPG. With this trait, anytime you activate Emergency Power 2 Auxiliary, you'll get some nice buff to crit chance and crit severity for exotic damage. So that means that buff won't apply to any of your weapons, but being a science build, you're going to be more dependent on your exotic abilities anyway. So buffing your exotic damage like this is going to be really helpful on a science build. Not much to say about the Elachi Battlecruiser, there are plenty of better ones available in the game. The NX Refit. This is another one where the ship itself really isn't super remarkable. It's not as bad as some other ships available in the Lobi Store, but it only has a Lieutenant Commander level Temporal Ops seat, so it's not full spec, and a Lieutenant level pilot seat. Pilot seating isn't quite the curse that it once was, but there's still not a lot you can do with that. It does get points for being a 5-2 escort though, so this can make a pretty decent beam overload or cannon scatter volley build. The big selling point with this ship, however, is the console and starship trait. The console is called Point Defense Bombardment Warhead. It used to be part of the torpedo meta, but it's kind of moved out of that now. But it's still a pretty decent console to have, as it gives a small buff to your crit chance and your torpedo damage as a passive, and the click ability itself can trigger Keep a Sight Lays weaponry like crazy. Now, this console is good for more than just torpedo builds, because if you're also using it alongside the DPRM, it's also pretty good for energy weapon builds. That 2-piece bonus will give you plus 33% to phaser, disruptor, and plasma damage. So if you have the DPRM and are using any 3 of those damage types, this is probably worth picking up. Now, if you're running Beam Overload, you'll probably have some interest in the starship trait this thing has, Preferential Targeting. With this trait, anytime you activate Beam Fire at Will or Cannon Scatter Volley, it will give a huge buff to Beam Fire at Will and Cannon Rapid Fire. So a common strategy with the starship trait is to put Cannon Scatter Volley in your tactical seating, and trigger that to buff your next usage of Beam Overload. Because with how the trait works, Fire at Will or Scatter Volley will buff both Beam Overload and Rapid Fire at the same time, doesn't matter which one you're using. So you use Scatter Volley to trigger the Beam Overload buff because Fire at Will trigger a shared cooldown between the 2 beam abilities. So yeah, if you like Beam Overload, this is a good trait. Now, the NX refit is also available in a Muds Market Bundle, the Muds Faith of the Heart Choice Pack, but honestly, this is one of the worst Muds bundles available, and if you're willing to spend that much money on the game already, I would just keep saving and go for the 10th Anniversary Bundle, because that has the legendary version of the NX refit, which is actually a better ship, and it will still come with the starship trait and console from this ship. The Jem'Hadar Strikewing Escort, it has a 4-3 weapons layout and isn't even full spec, I wouldn't bother with it. The Sphere Builder Science Ship, this thing is actually pretty impressive stats-wise. This is another full temporal science ship. Remember what I said earlier, temporal and EPG pair very well together. But this thing also has a lieutenant level intel seat, which is also good for generating anomalies thanks to ionic turbulence. And it has better tactical seating and a 4-2 weapons layout. Now, I know I was talking up the Bastille earlier on in this video, but honestly this is a much better ship for a science vessel. I'm pretty sure the Verne is still a more powerful science vessel with how much temporal seating you can get on that thing. But if you're wanting something that's more tactical or weapon focused than your usual science build, this is definitely the route I'd go. Oh yeah, this thing has a hangar bay, I totally forgot about that. This thing is basically a multi-mission science vessel before multi-mission science vessels were even a thing. Next is the Kelvin Timeline Intel Dreadnought Cruiser, better known as the Vengeance. Now, I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with this ship, because on the one hand, I hate it because I hate everything it stands for in Star Trek. The very idea of the Vengeance goes completely against what Starfleet and the Federation stand for. Even the name itself, Vengeance, is so not Starfleet. Plus the ship is butt ugly, and Into Darkness is one of the worst Star Trek movies in my opinion. But on the other hand, the ship's stats in Star Trek Online are pretty much exactly what I like in a playable ship. It's a dreadnought, it has a 5-3 weapons layout, it's a full intel ship, and has a secondary temporal seat, it has a hangar bay, and it's huge. I do love big ships. Oh, it also has a cloaking device because it's an intel ship. Honestly, I would go as far to say that this is the best ship available in the Lobi Store. And since the introduction of the advanced consoles, the ship has only gotten even better because it has 5 engineering console slots. So you're going to have plenty of room for those isomagnetic consoles. The console and trait on the Vengeance aren't bad either. They're hardly meta, but they're far from useless either. If you're like me and really enjoy broadside builds, that's where you use mostly beam arrays to focus all your damage on either side of your ship instead of through your forward arc, then you'll probably enjoy the console off this ship, Broadside Cannon Barrage. The console will fire a barrage of phaser damage in 2 90-degree cones on both sides of your ship. Accounting for both firing arcs on each side, that is a potential for 60 individual phaser attacks. That's per activation. The console gives a small +3 buff to current and maximum weapon power setting. I wonder if that'll stack with the isomag consoles. Oh, never mind, the wiki says it doesn't. That's lame. But still, this is a good console if you like that sort of build. The trait is called Target Rich Environment, and this can be useful if you like Beam Overload or Cannon Scatter Volley. After activating either of those 2 abilities, you will be granted a stacking damage buff to your directed energy weapon damage for every enemy target that you hit. You get 1% per stack, and it'll stack up to 30 times. So that is a potential for a 30% Cat 1 buff to your energy weapons. Now, 30% isn't amazing at Cat 1, but it's not horrible either. Oh my god, I'm not even 12 minutes in and I haven't even gotten past the ships yet. Alright, smash or pass round. The Cool Science Vessel, pass. Paradox Temporal Dreadnought, pass. This ship is nothing but lies. It is neither a temporal ship nor a dreadnought. Sort of. It's actually a science dreadnought, not a dreadnought cruiser, but it doesn't say that in the title, so it's misleading. But even more misleading, it's not a temporal ship. It doesn't even have temporal seating. And that's because this ship was made before temporal seating was even a thing. Anyway, pass on that, pass on the Herald Heavy Raider, pass on the Zal Heavy Cruiser, though it does have an interesting trait called Invincible. It makes you temporarily immune to damage. It's not that useful in PvE, and PvP players will absolutely hate you if you use it. The Adolith, pass on the ship itself but smash on the trait because that's the extension trait for Beam Overload, Super Weapon Ingenuity. So if you like Beam Overload, this is a must-have. Pass on the Vavar Battlecruiser, it's not even full spec. Same with the Hazari Destroyer. The rest of these are Tier 5 ships that just haven't gotten a Tier 6 version yet, except in the case of the Jem'Hadar Dreadnought Carrier, which did get a T6 version, but they made it a lockbox ship instead of a Lobi ship. Now, technically you could make any of these ships work with a Tier 5 U token, but at the same time, you're going to be missing a bunch of stuff that Tier 6 ships won't have, like specialization seating. I just don't think these are worth the price. Below the Tier 5 ships are just playable shuttles. If I had to pick one shuttle, it would be the Vodmar Fighter. This one comes with Beam Overload 1 built into it, so you don't have to use a bridge officer seat for it. So that frees up some actual bridge officer seating for something else. And at the bottom of this category are bridge officers. Each one has a unique trait, but none of them are particularly useful. I wouldn't pick any of these over just having another superior Romulan operative or a Watcher bridge officer. The only one really of note is the Xindi Reptilian Tactical Officer, and that's because he comes with a costume. So if you want the Xindi Reptilian costume for your captain or bridge officers, this is the way to get it. So yeah, those are the ships available in the Lobi Store and my opinions of them as of July of 2023. I hope you found them helpful. Be sure to let me know what you guys thought down below in the comments, and while you're down there, be sure to hit like and subscribe and hit that bell for notifications. If you'd like to further support the channel, you can hit that join button to become a channel member, or you can hit the super thanks button, or you can hit the, the link to the merch store. It's in the video description. If you're ever shopping on the Epic Game Store, be sure to use my content creator code STU1701. It doesn't cost you anything extra, but it does help out the channel, and I do appreciate it. That is creator code STU1701. Either way, thank you so much for watching. My name's Stu, and I will see you guys next time.